Alright, today's lesson is lesson 8-3, 8-4, day 2, and we're going to be looking again at factoring quadratic trinomials off the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Alright, go ahead and get down the first one. It's 5x squared plus 11x plus 2. And just like we did in our last lesson, we're going to multiply our first and our last terms. So we have 5 times 2, which equals 10. So now on our factor sheet, we're going to look at our factors of 10. Our factors of 10 are 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. So we're looking for factors of 10 that are going to add up to equal 11, because that's what we need in the middle. So 1 plus 10 gives us 11. And 2 plus 5 gives us 7. So again, our first one, the 11, that's what we're looking for here. So we know that 1 and 10 are the factors, 1 and 10 are the factors of 10 that we're going to be using to factor out this problem. So to show that, I'm going to say that this 11x translates to 10x plus 1x. And then I'm going to bring down my 2. Bring down my 5x squared. Alright, now I'm ready to factor out into two groups here, and I've got my first group here. I can factor out a 5 and an x here because I have two x's and then one x. So I'm going to factor out my 5. 5 divided by, I'm going to factor out my 5x. 5 divided by 5 is going to give me 1. X divided by x is going to give me x. Plus 10 divided by 5 is going to give me 2, and then x divided by x, I had one x and I took one out, so now I'm done with that x, it's gone. So that gives me 5x, and then open parentheses, 1x or just x plus 2. Now my next set, I have 1x plus 2. The only thing that I can factor out here is a 1. So I'm going to say plus, and then I'm going to say 1. And I can't factor out an x because I don't have an x over here, and then 2 divided by 1 is still 2. So 1x plus 2, 1x plus 2, that's going to go in my first parentheses, and I can write that as x plus 2. And then I have 5x plus 1 in my second set of parentheses. So now I'm going to check this by distributing. X times 5x is going to give me 5x squared. X times 1x is going to give me 1x. 2 times 5x is going to give me 10x. 2 times 1 is going to give me 2. I'm going to combine my 1x and my 10x, and that's going to give me 11x. Bring down my positive 2 and my 5x squared. So it does look exactly like this right here, which means it checks out. Make sure that you have all of that down before you move on. You can pause the video if you need to. Alright, go ahead and get down number 2. It's 3a squared minus 18a plus 27. If I look on my factor sheet, I can see that 3, 18, and 27 all have a common factor. They can all be divided by 3. So the first thing I'm going to do here is go ahead and factor out my 3. So I'm going to write that as 3, open parentheses, and I've divided 3 by 3, which leaves me with a 1a squared, which I can write as 1a. 18, negative 18 divided by 3 is going to give me negative 6a. And then 27 divided by 3 is going to give me 9. So now this is what I've got to deal with, and it's exactly like the one we just did. We're going to multiply our first term, which is, again, the 1 in front of the a, times our last term. So that's going to give us 1 times 9 equals 9. Now it's a positive 9, but if I notice right here, I have a negative 6. So that's telling me that my terms are both going to be negative when I'm looking at my factors of 9. They've both got to be negative because it's got to give me a negative number in the middle. So I'm going to come over my factor sheet and look at my factors of 9. I can have a negative 1 times a negative 9. or negative 3 times a negative 3, both of which are going to give me a positive 9. If I add them together, negative 3 plus negative 3 gives me negative 6. Negative 1 plus negative 9 gives me negative 10. I'm looking for one that's going to give me negative 6. So these are the terms that I'm going to use to factor out. So that negative 6 translates into negative 3a plus negative 3a. My 9 comes down, and my 1a squared comes down. So now I can factor out whatever I can in my two groups. So here I can factor out an a. So 1a squared divided by a is just a, and then negative 3a divided by a is just negative 3. Here I can factor out, saying that 3 and 9 have a common factor of 3, I can factor out another 3 here. So that's going to give me negative 3. I can't factor out an a because the 9 does not have a 3. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is going to be 1a. And then 9 divided by negative 3 is going to give me negative 3. So in my parentheses I have 1a minus 3. It's my first set of parentheses, and my second set of parentheses is just a minus 3. Now, I'm not quite done because I have to remember I factored out this 3 up here, so I have to bring this 3 down and put it in front of my two groups. And because this one is a little bit different than the one we just did, I'm going to go ahead and check this one with you and show you how to check when we have a number in front. So the first thing we're going to do in our check is we're going to multiply our terms just like we did last time. 1a, or a times a is a squared. A times negative 3 is negative 3a. Negative 3 times a, negative 3a. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. I'm going to combine my like terms. Negative 6a plus 9 and my a squared here. And then I'm going to distribute my 3 to everything inside the parentheses. So that translates to 3a squared. 3 times negative 6 gives me negative 18a, and 3 times 9 gives me 27. So this ends up being exactly what I had up here, so it checks. Again, this was my answer in the factored form. I realize I kind of ran it into my check there. Make sure that you have that down before you move on. There's a little better picture. I think it was kind of out of focus. All right, go ahead and write down number 3 before you panic. It's 6x squared minus 11xy minus 7y squared. We've got a lot going on here, all of which I think we've seen in previous problems, but we have two variables here, and then we also have some negatives rolling around that we're going to have to figure out what they mean for us when we start to factor this out. So the first thing we're going to do is look at all of our terms and see if we have any common factors between 6, 11, and negative 11 and negative 7. We don't have any common factors that we can instantly factor out. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and multiply our first and our last terms. And 6 times negative 7 equals negative 42. So we're going to look at our terms, our factors of negative 42. Obviously you don't have positives and negatives on your factor sheet. But what this means is we're going to look at 42, and if we are to get a negative 42, it means that one of these factors is going to be negative in every single instance or possible instance to get us what we need. What we need is a negative 11. So let's look at our factors. I could have negative 1 times 42, or 1 times negative 42. I could have negative 2 times 21, or 2 times negative 21. I could have negative 3 times 14, or 3 times negative 14. Negative 6 times 7, or 6 times negative 7. So now what I have to do is add up these separate groups and find out which one equals negative 11. I'm going to start at the bottom. So 6 plus negative 7 gives me negative 1. So it's not that one. Negative 6 plus 7 gives me positive 1. Negative 3 plus 14 gives me positive 11. 3 minus 14 gives me negative 11. Negative 11 is actually the term that I'm looking for. Negative 11 is the term that I'm looking for, so that's what I'm going to go with. These are the factors, 3 and negative 14. Now, please note that my negative 11 has an x and a y, which means that my 3 has an x and a y, and my negative 14 has an x and a y. Now I'm going to bring down, just like I have in all my other problems, my negative 7y squared and my 6x squared. Plus sign there in front of my positive 3. So now I'm going to factor out my groups. I have 6x squared and 3xy in my first group here, and I can factor out a 3 from the 6 and the 3, and I can factor out an x from my x squared and my xy. So I'm going to pull out a 3x. 6 divided by 3 is going to give me 2. X divided by x is going to give me x. 3 divided by 3 is going to give me 1. Xy divided by x. I had 1x and I took it away, so now I'm just left with the y. So that gives me 2x plus 1y. Now my second group is negative 14 and negative 7. I can factor out a negative 7 from this group, and that's going to leave me, negative 14 divided by negative 7 is going to leave me with a positive 2. And I can also factor out a y because I have a y here and a y here. So that's going to leave me again with a positive 2. And then I had one xy and I pulled out 1y, so I'm left with x. Negative 7 divided by negative 7 leaves me with a positive 1. I had 2 y's, I pulled out 1, and now I'm left with 1y. So in my two sets of parentheses, I'm going to put 2x plus y, because 1y and y are the same thing. And then my second set of parentheses, I'm going to put what's on the outside, my 3x minus 7y. That is my final answer. And I'm not going to make you check on this one. Make sure that you have that down before you move on.
All right, go ahead and write down number 4. We have 4r squared minus 11rs plus 6s squared. Again, don't let the fact that there's an r and an s this time scare you. We're still going to work this out exactly the same way. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look, and I have a 4, an 11, and a 6. And if I look at my factor sheet, the only thing that those things have in common is a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my method of factoring. So I'm going to take my first and my last here. I'm going to say 4 times 6 is 24. So then I'm going to look on my factor sheet at 24. And I'm going to list these factors of 24. So over here to the side, I'm going to say 24 is 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. So those are my factors. So now I'm going to add them, because again I'm looking for this 11. So if I add 1 and 24, I get 25. If I add 2 and 12, I get 14. 8 and 3, and I get 11. And 4 and 6, and I get 10. So here's my 11. So those are the factors that I need, 3 and 8. Now I'm going to go ahead and split this up. But now I have to be careful, because I needed two numbers that multiplied to a positive 24. So that was 3 and 8. But here I needed to add to a negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make both of these negative, because negative 3 times negative 8 is a positive 24, because negative times negative is a positive. But if I say negative 3 plus negative 8, I get a negative 11 when I add those. So I'm going to break this up and say negative 8RS and negative 3RS, and I'm putting the RS on there because that's what's on the middle here. And then I'm going to bring down my 6S squared and my 4R squared. And again, you could have flipped these around. Okay, your 3 could have been here, your 8 could have been there, it does not matter. So then I'm going to group these first two together, and I'm going to look at 4 and 8 on my factor sheet, and they have a 4 in common. Now this is where the RS thing gets a little bit confusing. If I look, both of these have at least one R. This one has 2 and this one has 1. So I can take out an R, but I can't take out an S because they don't both have an S. So I'm going to say 4 divided by 4 is 1. I had 2 R's and I took one of them out, so I have 1 left. Minus, and then I'm going to say I have 8 divided by 4 is 2. There's an R, but I took that R out right here. So I have an S left, because again I couldn't get rid of that S. So then I'm going to close my parentheses. Right now I'm going to go and group these two together. Since that front number is negative, I'm going to try taking out a negative. And I'm going to take out a 3, because if I look at 3 and 6 on my factor sheet, they both have a 3 in common. And if I look, this time they both have at least one S. This one has 2 S's and this one has 1. So I can take out an S here. But I can't take out an R because this 6 doesn't have an R. So I'm going to say negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. I have to bring that R down because I couldn't take an R out. I had an S, but I took it out, so there is no S left. Then I'm going to say 6 divided by negative 3 is a negative 2, because negative 3 times negative 2 is a positive 6. I had 2 S's and I took one out, so I have 1 S left, and I can close those parentheses. Again, what's in my parentheses is the same, and it should be. If it's not, you did something wrong. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this, but without the 1 in front because I don't need it. I'm just going to say R minus 2S is going to be one of my factors. And then over here I'm going to take what's on the outside, and I'm going to say 4R minus 3S here. So those are my two factors. And again, I could go back and check this and make sure. We're not going to do that just because of time's sake on here. Please make sure you have all of that work down before you move on. All right, go ahead and write down number 5. We have 10c to the third plus 19c squared minus 15c. Now again, our first thing to do is always look for a GCF. So if I look at 10, 19, and 15 on my factor sheet, they don't have anything in common other than a 1, but this one's a little bit different. Notice what they all do actually have. They all have a C. This one has 3 C's, this one has 2 C's, and this one has 1 C. So they all have at least 1 C in them. So I actually have to take that C out before I get started, just like I would if it was a number that was a GCF. So I'm going to bring down my 10. I had 3 C's. I took one out, so I have 2 left. Plus, bring down my 19. I had 2 C's and I took one out, so I have 1 left. Minus 15. There's a C, but I took a C out, so there's no C's left, so I'm just going to close those parentheses. Now I can go ahead and get started with my method of factoring. And I should have wrote this on this line, and I didn't, so I'm going to bring it down so that I can show where I'm multiplying. So I'm going to have to connect these together. So I'm going to say 10 times negative 15 is negative 150. I realize that your factor sheet doesn't go all the way up to 150, but we showed you how to make those factors, so that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to list all my factors of negative 150. Of course, my first one's always 1. Let's get that over a little bit. 1 and 150. So I'm going to say negative 1 and 150 and 1 and negative 150. Because again, when I have a negative, I have to list both. Then when I divide 150 by 2, I get 75. So I'm going to say 2, negative 2 and 75, and 2 and negative 75. When I divide 150 by 3, I get 50. So I'm going to say negative 3 and 50, and 3 and negative 50. Then when I multiply by 4, I get a decimal, so I don't want to do that. So when I multiply by 5, I get negative 5 and 30, and 5 and negative 30. Then I'm going to keep going. When I multiply by 6, I get 25. So I'm going to say negative 6 and 25, and 6 and negative 25. Then I've got one more. When I multiply, or whenever I divide by 7, I get a decimal. Whenever I divide by 8, I get a decimal. Whenever I divide by 9, I get a decimal. But if I multiply or divide by 10, I get 15. So I'm going to say negative 10 and 15, and 10 and negative 15. So there's a lot of those. We're looking for the one that will give us a positive 19. So I'm going to start adding those. So here, this one would give me 149. This one would give me negative 149. This one would give me 73. This one would give me negative 73 if I added. Here, this one would give me 47, and this would give me negative 47. And then negative 5 and 30 would give me 25, or negative 25. And remember, I'm looking for 19, so if I say negative 6 plus 25, there's my 19, and here would be my negative 19. Once you find it, you can go ahead and stop. I found the 19, that's right here in the middle, so I know I've got my factors of negative 6 and 25. So I'm going to split this up, and I'm going to say negative 6c and positive 25c. Bring down my minus 15 and my 10c squared. So that I'm going to group these first two together. If I look at 10 and 6, then I'm going to say that I have a 2 in common, and I also have a c in common because they both have at least 1. Alright, so I'm going to take out a 2 and a c. 10 divided by 2 is 5. I had 2 c's. I took one out. I have one left, so 5c. Minus 6 divided by 3, or 6 divided by 2 is 3. I had a c, but I took it out, so I close those parentheses. Over here, 15 and 25, I have a 5 in common. So I'm going to take out a 5, and I'm going to say 25 divided by 5 is 5. Bring down my c. Again, I can't take out a c this time because the 15 doesn't have one. And then minus 15 divided by 5 is 3. And this was a positive 5 that I took out. Notice these are the same, so I know I'm on the right track. So 5c minus 3 here. 2c plus 5 here. Now don't forget we took out that c in the very beginning up here. So I'm actually going to have to bring that down and put that right here with my answer. So my complete answer is c, parentheses 2c plus 5, parentheses 5c minus 3. Make sure that you have all that work written down before you move on. All right, go ahead and write down number 6. It's 3d squared minus d minus 10. Okay, I want you to go ahead and pause the video now and try this one on your own, and then we're just going to show you the answer to see if you got it correct in a few minutes. But what I want you to do first, before you do that, is since there's no number right here, I want you to put a 1 in front of that d so that you know what number you're looking for. So please go ahead and pause the video now and try this one. When you're finished, go ahead and hit play and see if you got it correct. Alright, hopefully you've paused the video and tried this one. Go ahead and check your work. When I multiply here, I get negative 30. So when I listed my factors of negative 30, I figured out that 5 and negative 6 would give me that negative 1 that I needed. So I split it up into 5d and negative 6d. Here I took out a d and ended up with 3d plus 5. Here I took out a negative 2 and I ended up with 3d plus 5. These were the same, so that was one set of parentheses, 3d plus 5. Over here I got d minus 2. So my final answer should have been d minus 2 times 3d plus 5. or if you could have said 3d plus 5 times d minus 2. So those are my two factors. If you got it correct, nice job. If not, please find your mistake and go back and fix it. If you didn't try it on your own, please make sure that you have all of that work copied before you move on. Alright, so our objective for today was to factor quadratic trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Hopefully now we can do that. We only had 6 examples instead of 10. We are going to look at one in class tomorrow before you get started on your assignment. That is the end of your video. Thank you for watching.